The tension in the boardroom was thick enough to slice with a memo. I sat at the far end of the gleaming mahogany table, laptop closed, shoulders squared, pretending not to notice the curious glances sliding in my direction. Everyone was dressed in their corporate armor, crisp suits, polished shoes, practiced smiles. I smoothed down my charcoal pencil skirt and adjusted my blazer, a custom piece I'd rewarded myself with after closing my third major acquisition. The CEO's chair remained conspicuously empty at the head of the table, and whispers circulated about the special announcement scheduled for today's meeting. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My brother Marcus entered last, his familiar swagger unchanged since childhood. He nodded to colleagues, shook hands with the CFO, and barely acknowledged my presence with a fleeting glance. The same dismissive look he'd given me 5 years ago, when I told him I was dropping out of business school to pursue my startup idea. Another one of Olivia's little projects, he'd said to our parents over Sunday dinner. She'll be back asking for help in 6 months. Mark my words. Those words had carved themselves into my memory, etched there like initials on tree bark. I'd replay them during sleepless nights coding in my studio apartment, during investor meetings where I was the only woman in the room, during the months I survived on ramen and determination. Marcus had always been the practical one, the one who followed our father into corporate finance, who took the well-trodden path to success. I was the dreamer, the risk-taker, the disappointment. The room quieted as Harrison Powell, the current CEO and my brother's direct superior, entered. Harrison was in his 60s, silver-haired and commanding, having built Meridian Technologies from a small software consulting firm into a regional powerhouse. My brother had been climbing Meridian's corporate ladder for 8 years, making no secret of his ambition to eventually take Harrison's place. "Good morning, everyone," Harrison began, his voice carrying that distinctive gravitas that had led Meridian through 3 decades of growth. "Thank you for joining us today for what is, for me, a bittersweet announcement." I watched my brother straighten almost imperceptibly in his chair. His right hand adjusted his tie, a nervous habit from childhood. "As many of you know, I've been considering succession planning for Meridian for some time now," Harrison continued. "Finding the right person to lead this company into its next chapter has been my primary focus for the past year." The room held its collective breath. My brother's expression remained carefully neutral, but I could see the anticipation in his eyes. This was the moment he'd been preparing for, positioning for, expecting. After careful consideration and unanimous board approval, "I'm pleased to introduce Meridian Technologies' new owner and CEO." Harrison turned, his hand extending not toward my brother, but toward me. "Olivia Chen." The silence that followed felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, a moment of perfect stillness before chaos. My brother's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, a dawning horror as understanding set in. I rose from my seat, accepting Harrison's outstretched hand with a firm shake. "Thank you, Harrison. I'm honored by the board's confidence and excited about Meridian's future." My voice didn't waver. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, perfected the balance between confidence and humility. I'd earned this through years of strategic planning and negotiation, but for Marcus, this was clearly an ambush. "Many of you may not be familiar with Ms. Chen's work," Harrison continued, "but her company, Nexus Solutions, has been revolutionizing enterprise software integration for the past 5 years. The board and I believe that bringing Meridian under Nexus's umbrella represents the best path forward for both companies, our clients, and our shareholders." I stepped to the front of the room, keenly aware of my brother's eyes boring into me. I founded Nexus with a simple mission: to create seamless connections between disparate systems. Today, we're expanding that mission by bringing together 2 complementary organizations. I look forward to working with each of you as we move forward. The meeting continued with presentations about the acquisition, integration timelines, and strategic vision. Throughout it all, Marcus remained silent, his earlier confidence replaced by a rigid professionalism that couldn't quite mask his shock. I recognized the clenched jaw, the tightly controlled breathing, the same expression he'd worn when I beat him at chess for the first time when I was 12. After the meeting adjourned, executives clustered around me with congratulations and questions. Marcus disappeared immediately. I wasn't surprised. We'd never been good at confrontation, at least not with each other. I made my way to what would now be my office, Harrison's former space with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline. The rain painted silvery trails down the glass, a fitting backdrop for the storm I knew was coming. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, my brother appeared in the doorway. He'd composed himself, but anger simmered just beneath the surface. How long have you been planning this? He asked, not bothering with pleasantries. I gestured to the chair across from me. 6 months of negotiations. The board approved it. Last week. And you didn't think to mention it? Not even a courtesy heads up to your own brother? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Would you have given me one? I asked quietly. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. This isn't personal, Marcus. Bullshit, he said, the word sharp as a paper cut. You bought my company out from under me. I acquired a company with strong potential that aligns with Nexus's growth strategy, I corrected. The fact that you work here is coincidental. Coincidental? He laughed, a harsh sound with no humor. You expect me to believe that? I leaned back in my chair. Believe what you want. The deal is done. So what happens now? You fire me? Make me report to my little sister? Is that the revenge you've been planning all these years? I studied him for a moment. Despite everything, he was still my brother, the same boy who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd stood up to neighborhood bullies for me, who'd drifted away as we grew older and our paths diverged. I'm offering you the position of Chief Strategy Officer, I said. You know this company better than almost anyone. You'd report directly to me, yes, but with significant autonomy and a seat on the executive committee. He stared at me, clearly caught off guard. Why would you do that? Because you're good at what you do. Because nepotism works both ways. Because despite what you might think, this isn't about getting back at you. What is it about then? I stood and walked to the window, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. Remember when I first told you about my idea for Nexus? We were at that coffee shop near your apartment. Vaguely, he said, though I could tell from his expression that he remembered perfectly. You told me I was wasting my time. That I didn't understand the market. That I should stick to something simpler, less technical. I turned to face him. You weren't entirely wrong. I did have a lot to learn. But you made one critical mistake, you underestimated how far determination can take someone. And now you've proven your point, he said, his voice flat. This isn't about proving a point, Marcus. It's about building something meaningful. Something that lasts. I'm offering you a chance to be part of that. He stood abruptly. I need time to think. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. As he reached the door, I called after him. One more thing. He paused but didn't turn around. Mom and Dad's anniversary dinner is on Friday. I assume I'll see you there? His shoulders tensed. You're really going to show up now? After avoiding family gatherings for years? I wasn't avoiding them. I was building a company. There's a difference. He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. I sank back into my chair, the adrenaline of the day finally catching up with me. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend and COO, Zoe. How did the big reveal go? About as expected, I typed back. Marcus is processing. Translation, he's freaking out, came Zoe's immediate response. I smiled despite myself. Pretty much. Want me to come over with champagne later? We should celebrate properly. I glanced at the stacks of integration documents waiting for my review. Rain check? Too much to do tonight. All work and no play makes Olivia a dull CEO, she texted. Back with an eye roll emoji. Fine, but we're celebrating this weekend. Non-negotiable. I set my phone down and turned to the rain-washed view. 5 years ago, I'd been working out of my apartment, scraping together funds from maxed-out credit cards and a small inheritance from my grandmother. My parents had been concerned but supportive in their distracted way, busy with their own careers. And my brother's more conventional success. They'd never quite understood what I was building, but they'd tried, more than Marcus had, anyway. The drive to my parents' anniversary dinner that Friday felt like traveling back in time. The familiar streets of the neighborhood where I grew up hadn't changed much, the same tidy houses with manicured lawns, the park where I'd spent countless summer afternoons, the community center where I'd taken coding classes against my father's wishes. He'd wanted me to focus on business fundamentals, not get lost in the technical weeds, as he put it. I parked my Tesla behind my brother's BMW in the driveway. I'd deliberately chosen not to drive the Porsche today, no need to be flashy, despite the temptation to make a statement. This wasn't about showing off, it was about showing up. My mother answered the door, her surprise quickly masked by a warm smile. Olivia. What a lovely surprise. Her hug felt genuine, if a bit tentative. We weren't sure you'd make it. I wouldn't miss it, I said, handing her a carefully wrapped package. Happy anniversary. The living room looked exactly as I remembered, the same leather sofa where I'd spent hours reading programming books, the same family photos on the wall chronicling our growth. I noticed my college graduation photo was still displayed prominently, though nothing more recent had been added. No surprise there, my parents hadn't quite known how to celebrate my unconventional milestones. My father emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Olivia. This is unexpected." He embraced me briefly. "Good to see you. How's your project going?" 5 years, millions in revenue, 3 offices, and over 100 employees, and he still called it my project. I bit back the correction. "It's going well, Dad." "Very well, actually." "She's being modest," my mother interjected, having opened the anniversary gift, a digital photo frame I'd loaded with images from their 40 years together. "I saw an article about her company in Business Weekly last month. Something about a major acquisition?" She looked at me questioningly. Before I could respond, the front door opened, and Marcus walked in with his wife, Elena. He stopped short. When he saw me, his expression unreadable. "Marcus," I nodded. "Olivia," he returned evenly. Elena, ever the peacemaker, moved forward to hug me. "It's been too long," she said warmly. "We've missed you at family gatherings." Dinner was a masterclass in polite avoidance. We discussed my parents' upcoming anniversary trip to Greece, Elena's work as an architect, the unseasonably warm weather, everything except the elephant in the room. My father asked Marcus about work, and my brother skillfully deflected with vague assurances that everything was in transition. It wasn't until dessert that my mother, perhaps emboldened by the wine, broached the subject. "So, Olivia, Marcus mentioned there've been some changes at Meridian. Something about new ownership?" Marcus stiffened beside me, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. I took a sip of water, buying myself a moment. "Yes, that's right. Meridian was acquired last week." I kept my tone casual, matter of fact. "Such a shame," my father said, shaking his head. "Harrison Powell built that company from nothing. Hate to see it gobbled up by some faceless corporation." Marcus's knuckles whitened around his fork. "Actually," I said carefully, "it wasn't acquired by a corporation. It was acquired by Nexus Solutions." I paused. "My company." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's wineglass stopped halfway to her lips. My father stared at me, processing. "Your company bought Meridian Technologies?" he finally asked, his tone suggesting I might have misspoken. "Yes. The acquisition was finalized last week. I'm the new CEO." My mother set down her glass with a shaky hand. "But that's where Marcus works." "It is," I confirmed. All eyes turned to Marcus, who was studying his plate with intense focus. "I've offered Marcus a position as Chief Strategy Officer," I continued. "He hasn't given me his answer yet." My father turned to my brother. "Is this true?" Marcus nodded. Once, still not looking up. "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked him. He finally raised his eyes. "I was processing the information myself." "This is quite unexpected," my father said, his business background clearly kicking in as he calculated the implications. "Meridian is a significant player in the market. The acquisition must have been substantial." "It was," I agreed simply. "I had no idea your company had grown to that scale," he continued, reassessment visible in his expression. "Few people did. We've kept a relatively low profile while focusing on growth." "Well," my mother said, attempting to recalibrate the conversation. "This calls for a toast, doesn't it? To Olivia's success." She raised her glass, and after a moment's hesitation, my father and Elena joined her. Marcus finally looked at me directly, a complex mix of emotions in his eyes. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his glass as well. "To success," he said, his voice neutral. However unexpected. Later, as I helped my mother clear the dishes, she spoke quietly. "Your brother has always been so competitive. Even as children. I remember when you won that science fair in 8th grade, he didn't speak to you for days." I smiled at the memory. The solar-powered water purifier. He'd worked so hard on his financial literacy program. Was sure he'd win. She rinsed a plate, her movements methodical. "He's not used to being overshadowed, especially by his little sister." "This isn't about overshadowing him, Mom." She gave me a knowing look. Perhaps not intentionally. In the living room, I could hear my father asking Marcus detailed questions about the acquisition, his tone a mixture of confusion and reluctant admiration. "Your father never quite understood what you were building," my mother continued. "Too technical for him. But he saved every article that mentioned your company." She nodded toward a drawer in the sideboard. "He has a folder." This surprised me. "Really?" She nodded. "He's proud of you, in his way. Just doesn't know how to show it." As I drove home that night, the city lights blurred through a light drizzle. My phone rang through the car's speakers, Zoe checking in. How was the family dinner from hell? She asked without preamble. Surprisingly not hellish, I replied. Awkward, yes. Tense, definitely. But also, necessary. Did Marcus announce his decision about the job? Not yet. But I think he's leaning toward accepting. That should make for interesting executive meetings, Zoe laughed. Though I still think you're being too generous after the way he dismissed your ideas for years. I signaled for my exit, considering her words. Maybe. But this isn't about evening scores. No? She sounded skeptical. Not even a little? I smiled to myself. Okay, maybe a tiny bit. But mostly it's about building the best team possible. And despite our history, Marcus is good at what he does. Your capacity for forgiveness continues to astound me, Zoe said. I would have fired his ass or at least made him sweat a lot more. The day is young, I laughed. Besides, having him report to me is probably punishment enough for his ego. Monday morning, I arrived at Meridian's offices early, wanting time to settle in before the day's meetings began. To my surprise, Marcus was already there, waiting outside my office door, a thick folder under his arm. Morning, he said, his tone carefully professional. Do you have a minute? I unlocked my door and gestured him in. Of course. He sat across from me, placed the folder on my desk, and slid it toward me. My answer? And my conditions. I raised an eyebrow but opened the folder. Inside was a formally written acceptance of the Chief Strategy Officer position, along with a detailed 90-day plan for integrating Meridian's operations with Nexus's platform. You've been busy, I observed, skimming the comprehensive analysis. I don't do things halfway, he said. I'm aware. I closed the folder. And the conditions? 3 things. First, I want autonomy over my department. You can veto decisions? But I need room to operate without micromanagement. I nodded. Reasonable. Second, I want Elena's firm considered for the design of the new Seattle headquarters. No guarantees, just a fair shot at the contract. Also reasonable. She's talented. And third, he hesitated, I want us to find a way to work together. That doesn't destroy what's left of our relationship. This caught me off guard. It was perhaps the most vulnerable thing my brother had said to me in years. That's not a professional condition, I pointed out quietly. No, he agreed. It's not. I studied him for a moment. Why now? You've had no problem keeping our relationship at arm's length for years. He leaned back, considering his words carefully. When Harrison announced you as the new owner, my first thought wasn't about my career. It was wondering when you had become capable of something I never thought you could do. He met my eyes directly. That reaction bothered me. A lot. Made me realize how little I've been paying attention. And now? Now I'm paying attention. I tapped my fingers lightly on the folder. The integration plan is good. Better than good, actually. I know this company inside and out, he said. Simply. Which is why I want you on my team, despite our complicated history. He nodded, accepting this. So we have a deal? I extended my hand across the desk. We have a deal, Chief Strategy Officer Chen. He shook my hand firmly, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Does this mean I have to call you boss now? Absolutely, I said, not bothering to hide my smile. In writing, whenever possible. His laugh was short but genuine, the first real moment of connection we'd shared in years. As he turned to leave, I called after him, Marcus? He paused at the door. That night at the coffee shop, when you said I was wasting my time, part of me knew even then that I'd prove you wrong someday. He was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I'm glad you did. After he left, I stood by the window, watching the morning fog lift from the city below. The hard part wasn't over, integrating 2 companies never was, especially with the added complexity of family dynamics. But for the first time in years, I felt like my brother and I might find our way back to something resembling friendship. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe, board meeting in 20. Ready to officially announce your brother's appointment? Ready, I replied. Then, after a moment's thought, I added, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Philosopher. CEO mode activated, she texted back with an eye roll emoji. Save it for your memoir. I laughed and tucked my phone away, gathering my materials for the meeting. The future stretched before me, complicated, challenging, and unexpectedly hopeful. 5 years earlier, I stood in the rain outside the gleaming corporate headquarters of Meridian Technologies, staring up at the building where my brother worked. The interview had gone poorly, not because I lacked qualifications, but because the hiring manager couldn't seem to get past my age and gender. We're looking for someone with more gravitas, he'd said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Code 4, not a 26-year-old woman fresh out of an abandoned MBA program. I'd called Marcus afterward, hoping for advice, maybe some encouragement. Instead, he'd sighed, that familiar sound of disappointment I'd grown accustomed to. What did you expect, Liv? You dropped out of Wharton to chase some pipe dream. Now you want to slide in through the side door? That's not how it works. The rejection stung, but his dismissal hurt more. I'd stood there in the rain, water seeping through my carefully selected interview shoes, and made a decision. I wouldn't try to join someone else's company. I would build my own. That night, I emptied my savings account, all $18,246 of it, and registered Nexus Solutions LLC. I had no employees, no office, not even a clear business plan yet. What I did have was an idea that had been germinating since my second year in business school. Enterprise software systems were needlessly fragmented, creating inefficiencies that cost companies millions. I'd seen it firsthand during internships. Watched IT departments struggle with integration issues while executives complained about implementation costs. My apartment became my headquarters, a studio in Belltown with a fold-out desk and a view of the brick wall next door. I covered that wall with white boards, mapping out the architecture for what would become our flagship product, an integration platform that could connect disparate enterprise systems seamlessly, regardless of age or origin. For 3 months, I lived on instant noodles and determination, coding 18 hours a day. When I wasn't coding, I was researching potential clients, building financial models, or sleeping in short, fitful bursts. My parents called occasionally, their concern barely masking their skepticism. There's still time to go back to school, my father would say. Or at least get a real job while you figure things out. Marcus didn't call at all. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My former programming professor, Dr. Eliza Kaminsky, connected me with a small manufacturing company struggling with their legacy systems. They can't afford the big consulting firms, she told me. But they're desperate enough to take a chance on you. Northwest Manufacturing became my first client. Their CIO, a gruff veteran named Tom Harmon, was initially skeptical. You're telling me you can get our inventory system talking to our CRM for a tenth of what Oracle quoted us, he'd asked, arms crossed. I can do it in half the time, too, I'd replied, with more confidence than I felt. 2 weeks later, when the integration was complete and running smoothly, Tom's skepticism transformed into advocacy. Whatever she's charging, pay it, he told his CEO. Then hire her to fix everything else. That first project netted Nexus $15,000, barely enough to cover expenses and give me a meager salary. But more importantly, it gave me a reference, a case study, and validation that my approach worked. Tom referred me to 2 other companies, and suddenly I had a pipeline. By month 6, I hired my first employee, Zoe Park, a brilliant developer I'd known from college who'd grown disillusioned with her corporate job. This better not be another tech bro startup where we work ourselves to death for someone else's exit strategy, she'd said during our coffee meeting. It's a Texas startup where we work ourselves to death for our own exit strategy, I'd countered, and she'd laughed, signing on immediately. We moved into a tiny office above a Thai restaurant in Capitol Hill. The space was cramped, the Wi-Fi spotty, and the air perpetually scented with lemongrass and fish sauce. But it was ours, and the rent was manageable. We covered the walls with more whiteboards, mapped out an ambitious product roadmap, and began pitching to larger clients. One night, as Zoe and I shared pad thai directly from the takeout container, she asked me the question I'd been avoiding. So what's the endgame here? Are we building to sell? IPO? World domination? I twirled noodles around my chopsticks, considering. I want to build something sustainable. Something that changes how businesses think about their systems. Not just a quick flip. Noble, she nodded. But also vague. We need concrete goals, metrics, milestones. She was right, of course. The next day, we created our first formal business plan. 5-year projections, quarterly targets, funding strategies. It was aspirational, perhaps even audacious, but it gave us direction. Year 1 was brutal. We landed enough clients to stay afloat but not enough to grow significantly. Every new contract felt like a minor miracle. I maxed out 3 credit cards, took out a small business loan, and still barely made payroll some months. Zoe and I went without salaries twice, living on instant noodles and coffee while assuring our growing team, now 5 people, that better days were coming. The lowest point came during a family dinner celebrating my father's retirement. Marcus had just been promoted to director at Meridian, and my parents couldn't stop gushing about his success. When they finally turned to me, the question was predictable: how's your little company doing, dear? I could have told them about our growing client list, about the innovative solution we'd developed for a healthcare provider that saved them millions in integration costs. Instead, I gave the answer they expected: we're making progress. Marcus, 3 drinks in and feeling magnanimous, patted my hand. It's admirable, really. Stubborn as always, but admirable. You know, there's an entry-level position opening. In my department. Nothing fancy, but it could get you back on track. The table went quiet, waiting for my response. I forced a smile. Thanks, but I'm good where I am. Are you, though? He pressed. Because from what I hear, you're barely keeping the lights on. Where exactly did you hear that? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. He shrugged. Seattle's tech world is small. Word gets around. Later that night, I sat in my car outside my parents' house, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't angry at Marcus, not entirely. I was angry at myself for letting his doubt creep under my skin, for questioning my own path even for a moment. I drove to our tiny office instead of going home. The lights of Seattle blurred through my tears, but by the time I arrived, my resolve had hardened. I spent that night rebuilding our pitch deck, refining our value proposition, and drafting emails to 20 potential investors I'd been too intimidated to approach before. The next morning, bleary-eyed but determined, I called an emergency team meeting. Our 5 employees crowded around the small conference table, really just a folding table from Costco, concern evident on their faces. We've been playing it safe, I told them. Taking on small projects, keeping our heads down. That ends today. I laid out a bold new strategy: focus exclusively on enterprise-level clients, develop a proprietary integration platform that could scale across industries, and pursue serious funding to fuel rapid growth. Zoe studied me, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. What changed overnight? I realized we're better than I've been letting us be, I answered simply. The pivot was risky. We turned down smaller clients to focus on larger opportunities. We invested our limited resources in building a more robust platform. For 2 terrifying months, our bank account dwindled while we concentrated on landing bigger fish. The gamble paid off when West Coast Health, a regional healthcare network with 40 facilities, signed on as our first enterprise client. Their CIO had heard about our work from Northwest Manufacturing and reached out directly. We need someone who can integrate our patient records across all facilities without disrupting operations, she explained. The big vendors say it can't be done without replacing our entire infrastructure. They're wrong, I told her confidently. The West Coast contract was worth more than all our previous work combined. It gave us breathing room, credibility, and a showcase project that would open doors throughout the healthcare industry. We doubled our team, moved to a legitimate office space in South Lake Union, and started paying ourselves proper salaries. Year 2 saw exponential growth. Our healthcare solution caught the attention of industry publications, and suddenly we were fielding calls from hospitals and clinics nationwide. We expanded our focus to include financial services, another sector plagued by integration challenges, and found similar success. By year 3, we had 50 employees, a sleek office overlooking Elliott Bay, and a growing reputation as the go-to solution for complex enterprise integration challenges. We'd raised a modest Series A round, bringing in $5 million from investors who believed in our vision but didn't demand control. I rarely saw my family during this period. Holidays were often spent with the Nexus team, celebrating milestones or working through critical deadlines. My parents sent occasional texts expressing concern about my work-life balance, and Marcus remained distant, our interactions limited to perfunctory birthday wishes and obligatory family events. That changed unexpectedly when my mother was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. The news hit our family like a thunderbolt, temporarily suspending old tensions. I scaled back my hours at Nexus, delegating more to my growing executive team so I could attend appointments with my mother. It was during one of these hospital visits that I ran into Marcus in the cafeteria. He looked exhausted, the confident corporate facade temporarily stripped away. How is she? I asked, joining him at his table without waiting for an invitation. Scared, he answered honestly. Trying not to show it. We sat in silence for a moment, the background noise of the hospital cafeteria filling the space between us. Your company developed the patient portal system here, he finally said, gesturing vaguely around us. Mom mentioned it. Said it makes tracking her appointments easier. I nodded. It's one of our healthcare modules. Connects with their electronic medical records system. It's good, he admitted. Intuitive. Better than the crap we use at Meridian. It was perhaps the first genuine compliment he'd given my work. I accepted it with a simple, thanks. How's business? He asked, making a visible effort at normal conversation. I could have given him the sanitized version, the same vague assurances I offered at family gatherings. Instead, I decided on honesty. We're growing faster than I can hire. Just closed Series B funding last month, $25 million. Expanding into Europe next quarter. His eyebrows rose slightly. Serious money. Serious business, I countered. Something shifted in his expression, not quite respect, not yet, but a re-evaluation. I may have underestimated you, he said finally. I smiled. You may have. Our mother's treatment was successful, and within 6 months, she was in remission. The experience changed our family dynamics subtly but significantly. My parents began taking more interest in my work, occasionally dropping by the Nexus offices for lunch. My father, ever the business strategist, started offering advice that was sometimes even useful. Marcus and I established a fragile truce. Our interactions less combative, more cautiously cordial. Year 4 marked Nexus's transition from promising startup to established player. We hit $50 million in annual revenue, expanded to 120 employees across 3 offices, and launched a cloud-based version of our platform that opened new market segments. Industry analysts began including us in the same conversations as Oracle, SAP, and other enterprise giants. It was during this period that I first heard rumors about Meridian Technologies seeking a buyer. The company had been struggling to innovate, losing market share to more agile competitors. Harrison Powell, approaching retirement age, was reportedly looking for an exit strategy. The idea formed slowly, almost subconsciously at first. Meridian's client base would complement Nexus's perfectly. Their established sales channels could accelerate our growth. Their technical debt, the legacy systems they struggled to modernize, was exactly the kind of challenge our platform excelled at addressing. I brought the possibility up during a strategy session with my executive team. What would you think about acquiring Meridian Technologies? I asked, trying to sound casual. Zoe, now our COO, nearly choked on her coffee. The company where your brother works? The one that wouldn't hire you 5 years ago? That Meridian Technologies? It makes strategic sense, I insisted. Their market position, their client relationships, their karma value when you become your brother's boss? Zoe finished, raising an eyebrow. I ignored that. Run the numbers. Let's see if it makes financial sense before we get caught up in the personal aspects. The analysis was compelling. Meridian's valuation had dropped considerably due to their innovation struggles, making them affordable despite their size. Their client retention remained strong, suggesting the core business was sound despite management challenges. And their technology stack, while dated, could be transformed by our integration platform. We approached Harrison Powell discreetly, through intermediaries at first. When he realized who was behind the inquiry, he requested a direct meeting. I'll be honest, he said when we finally sat down in a private dining room at Canlis, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant. I never expected Olivia Chen to be the one making this offer. Life is full of surprises, I replied, keeping my tone professional. He studied me with shrewd eyes that had overseen 3 decades of business deals. Your brother works for me. Did you know that? I'm aware. He's talented. Ambitious. Expects to be in the running for my position when I retire. I nodded, waiting. This would complicate things for him, Harrison continued. Business often involves complications, I said evenly. Our offer is based on Meridian's strategic value to Nexus, not on personal connections. He smiled slightly. Very diplomatic. But we both know there's more to it than that. I met his gaze directly. 5 years ago, Meridian wouldn't even hire me for an entry-level position. Now I'm offering to buy the company. Yes, there's a certain symmetry there. But this is primarily a business decision, and we're prepared to make a competitive offer. Harrison leaned back, considering. I've been watching Nexus since you started making waves in healthcare integration. Impressive work. Innovative approach. He paused. I think Meridian could benefit from that innovation. We've grown complacent. The negotiations took 3 months. Every detail had to be carefully considered, from valuation to integration plans to employee retention strategies. Throughout it all, we maintained absolute confidentiality. Marcus had no idea his company was being acquired, let alone by his sister's firm. The night before the board was set to approve the deal, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the Seattle skyline, lights reflecting off Elliott Bay. Was I doing this for the right reasons? Was there a part of me, however small, that wanted to prove something to my brother, to my family, to myself? Zoe called around midnight, somehow sensing my doubt. Cold feet, she asked without preamble. Just thinking it through, I replied. For the 100th time, she observed. Look, the deal makes sense. The board agrees. The numbers work. If you're worried about your brother, I'm not, I said quickly. Too quickly. She said, unconvinced. Well, whatever your complicated sibling dynamics are, they don't change the fact that this acquisition is good for Nexus. Period. She was right, of course. The personal satisfaction of walking into Meridian as its new owner was secondary to the strategic value of the acquisition. But it would be dishonest to pretend that satisfaction didn't exist. Thanks, Zoe, I said. See you tomorrow for the big announcement. Wear something intimidating, she advised. Nothing says I've arrived like a power suit and the title of CEO. I laughed, some of the tension easing. Noted. The board approved the deal unanimously the next morning. By afternoon, the papers were signed, and Meridian Technologies officially became a subsidiary of Nexus Solutions. Harrison Powell insisted on making the announcement himself, scheduling an all-hands meeting for the following day. They're my people, he explained. They deserve to hear it from me. I respected that. We agreed that he would announce the acquisition and introduce me as Meridian's new owner and CEO. What we didn't discuss was how my brother would react to this unexpected development. That was a bridge I would have to cross when I came to it. That night, I drove to the waterfront and walked along the pier, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. In 5 years, I'd gone from a rejected job applicant to the owner of the company that had rejected me. The journey had been harder than I could have imagined, filled with sleepless nights, financial gambles, and moments of crippling self-doubt. But I'd persevered, building something sustainable, something meaningful. As I watched the ferries cross the Sound, their lights glowing against the darkening sky, I thought about the next chapter. Integrating Meridian into Nexus would be challenging. Navigating a new professional relationship with my brother would be even more so. But for the first time in years, I felt ready to face that challenge head-on. My phone buzzed with a text. From Harrison, all set for tomorrow. 9 a.m. sharp. I typed back a simple, I'll be there, then slipped my phone back into my pocket, taking one last look at the water before heading home. Tomorrow would change everything, for Nexus, for Meridian, for my family, and for me. Whatever came next, I'd face it as I'd faced every other challenge, with determination, resilience, and the quiet confidence that comes from building something from nothing. The first week after the acquisition announcement was a blur of integration. Meetings, employee town halls, and media interviews. Business journals scrambled to cover the story, Tech's new power player, how Olivia built Nexus from rejection to acquisition. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same publications that had ignored us for years were now clamoring for exclusive interviews and profile pieces. I maintained a careful balance in these conversations, focusing on the strategic benefits of the acquisition rather than the personal narrative. This merger combines Meridian's established market presence with Nexus's innovative integration platform, I would explain. Together, we're positioned to transform how enterprises approach system integration. When reporters inevitably asked about my brother's position at Meridian, I deflected with practiced ease. We're evaluating all leadership roles to ensure the right organizational structure moving forward. Behind closed doors, the reality was more complex. Marcus had accepted the Chief Strategy Officer position, but our working relationship remained tentative, like ice in early winter, seemingly solid but prone to cracking under pressure. Our executive team meetings often carried an undercurrent of tension, with Marcus sometimes challenging my decisions more aggressively than necessary. After one particularly contentious meeting about consolidating the sales teams, Zoe cornered me in my office. "You need to address the elephant in the boardroom," she said bluntly. "This passive-aggressive dance with your brother is making everyone uncomfortable." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "It's complicated. It's family drama bleeding into business," she countered. "And it's undermining your authority." She was right, of course. That evening, I sent Marcus a text, drinks at Needle and Thread. 8 p.m. Just us. The speakeasy-style bar above a restaurant in Capitol Hill was deliberately chosen, neutral territory, far from both our offices, with private booths where conversations couldn't be overheard. Marcus arrived 10 minutes late, dressed in the same crisp button-down he'd worn to work, though he'd loosened his tie slightly. "Interesting choice," he commented, sliding into the booth across from me. "Bit pretentious, isn't it?" "They make a good old-fashioned," I replied, nodding to the bartender who already knew my order. "And nobody's recording our conversation. For the company newsletter." He almost smiled at that. "Fair enough." We sat in silence until our drinks arrived, an old-fashioned for me, a neat scotch for him. I took a sip, organizing my thoughts before speaking. "This isn't working," I finally said. He raised an eyebrow. "You're firing me already?" "That didn't take long." "I'm not firing you. I'm saying we need to figure out how to work together effectively, or this merger is going to fail." He swirled his scotch, staring into the amber liquid. "It's not exactly comfortable reporting to my kid sister." And it's not exactly comfortable having my decisions constantly undermined by someone who's supposed to be part of my leadership team, I countered. But here we are. He looked up, his expression unreadable. What do you want from me, Olivia? Respect, I said simply. Not as your sister. As your CEO. Respect is earned. And you think I haven't earned it? The question came out sharper than I intended. He was quiet for a long moment. I think you've done something impressive with Nexus. More than impressive, remarkable. But that doesn't mean you automatically know what's best for Meridian. I never claimed to, I replied, softening my tone. That's why I kept you on. You know Meridian better than anyone, including Harrison. I need that knowledge. I need your expertise. I leaned forward. But I can't have you questioning every decision in front of the entire executive team. So I should just nod and smile? No. You should raise concerns, offer alternatives, push back when necessary, but do it the right way. In private when possible, and always with solutions, not just objections. He considered this, taking a slow sip of his scotch. And if I disagree with your final decision? Then you support it publicly, even if you argued against it privately. That's how leadership teams function. Sounds like you want a yes man after all. I shook my head, frustration mounting. What I want is a chief strategy officer who understands the difference between healthy debate and undermining authority. What I want is my brother to stop seeing every interaction as a competition he needs to win. That hit a nerve. His jaw tightened. Is that what you think this is about? Me competing with you? Isn't it? I challenged. It's been that way since we were kids. You always had to be the best, the smartest, the most successful. And when I started to succeed in a way you hadn't predicted, you couldn't handle it. That's not fair, he said, but there was less conviction in his voice than I expected. Then tell me what it is, Marcus. Because I'm trying to make this work, professionally and personally, but I can't do it alone. He was quiet for so long. I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, less defensive. Do you know what Dad said to me after your announcement? After the shock wore off? I shook my head. He said, your sister built something from nothing, while you've been climbing someone else's ladder. Just like that. 30 years of being the golden child, and suddenly I'm the underachiever. I hadn't expected this vulnerability. Dad's opinion isn't the measure of your worth, I said carefully. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. That's rich, coming from you. You've been trying to prove him wrong for years. Maybe initially, I admitted. But at some point, it stopped being about Dad, or you, or anyone else. It became about building something I believed in. He studied me, really looked at me perhaps for the first time since the acquisition. When did that happen? The switch? I considered the question. There wasn't one moment. It was gradual. Each client we helped, each problem we solved, each person we hired, it became less about proving a point and more about creating something meaningful. I paused. The validation stopped mattering as much as the vision. Something shifted. In his expression, not quite acceptance, but a step away from resistance. I don't know if I can separate the personal and professional as easily as you seem to. I never said it was easy, I replied. But it's necessary. For both of us, for both companies. He nodded slowly, finishing his scotch. So where does that leave us? With a choice, I said. We can keep this adversarial dynamic and watch it poison both companies, or we can find a way to leverage our different strengths and perspectives. That simple, huh? No, I acknowledged. Not simple at all. But necessary. He signaled the bartender for another round. I can't promise overnight transformation. But I'll work on it. It wasn't a full resolution, but it was a start. We spent the next hour discussing specific integration challenges, finding areas where we actually agreed more than we disagreed. By the third round, the conversation had shifted to more personal territory, catching up on each other's lives beyond the headlines. Elena's pregnant, he said suddenly, studying his glass. Due in January. We haven't told anyone yet. I blinked in surprise. Marcus, congratulations. That's wonderful news. He nodded, a genuine smile breaking through his usual reserve. We've been trying for a while. Almost gave up, honestly. You're going to be amazing parents. I said, meaning it. I hope so. He hesitated. It changes things, you know? Makes me think about what really matters. I understood then that his acceptance of my leadership wasn't just about professional respect, it was about reshaping priorities as he faced this new chapter in his life. Being chief strategy officer might actually give you better work-life balance than chasing the CEO position, I offered. He chuckled. There's that silver lining. When we left the bar, there was a tentative truce between us. Not friendship, not yet, but the possibility of something better than what we'd had before. The next executive meeting went noticeably smoother. Marcus still challenged ideas, but his approach was more constructive, offering alternatives rather than just objections. When I made final decisions, he nodded his acceptance, even when I could tell he wasn't fully convinced. Zoe noticed immediately. "Whatever you said to him worked," she whispered as we left the conference room. "He almost acted like a normal executive today instead of a wounded alpha male." "Progress," I agreed. "Small steps." The integration process accelerated after that. We began merging departments carefully, identifying redundancies while trying to minimize layoffs. I instituted a policy that any necessary staff reductions would come equally from both companies. Nexus wouldn't be favored just because we were the acquirer. This approach earned me respect from Meridian's employees, many of whom had feared a wholesale replacement of leadership. Harrison Powell, who had stayed on as an advisor during the transition, expressed his approval during one of our weekly check-ins. "You're not doing what most acquirers do," he observed as we walked through Meridian's engineering department. "Usually there's a purge, a reshuffling to assert dominance. That destroys morale and institutional knowledge," I replied. "We didn't buy Meridian to gut it. We bought it because of what it is, what it knows, what it can become." He nodded thoughtfully. "Your brother is adapting better than I expected. He was quite vocal about his ambitions to take my place someday." "He's evolving," I said simply. "People can surprise you," Harrison agreed. "I found that sometimes. The most rigid personalities have the most profound transformations once they finally start to bend." 3 months into the integration, we faced our first major crisis. A critical client, a multinational bank that represented 15% of Meridian's annual revenue, expressed serious concerns about the acquisition. Their CIO requested an emergency meeting, citing compatibility concerns between their systems and Nexus's platform. Marcus was the one who brought me the news, appearing in my office late on a Friday afternoon. "Lakeshore Financial is getting cold feet," he said without preamble. "Their CIO, Richard Barnett, wants to meet Monday morning. He's making noise about exploring other vendors." I frowned. "Lakeshore has been with Meridian for what, 12 years? 13, Marcus confirmed. They're our longest-standing financial sector client. If they walk, others might follow." "What's their specific concern?" Marcus hesitated. "Officially, they're worried about compatibility issues with their legacy systems. Unofficially." He trailed off. "Unofficially? Barnett and Harrison go way back. Golf buddies, vacation together. I think he's nervous about the changing of the guard." I nodded, understanding. "He wants reassurance that the relationship will remain stable under new leadership." "Exactly." And Marcus paused, seemingly reluctant to continue. "And what? And I'm not sure he's thrilled about dealing with a female CEO half his age," he finished bluntly. "He's old school. Very old school." I'd faced this bias before, of course, the assumption that youth and gender somehow equated to less capability. Usually, I could overcome it with competence and results. But with a nervous client already on edge about the acquisition, I needed a different approach. "You know him well?" I asked. Marcus nodded. "I've managed the relationship for the past 3 years. He trusts me." "Then you should lead the meeting," I said. He looked surprised. "You want me to handle it alone?" "No," I clarified. "We'll both go. But you'll take point. Show him that despite the ownership change, his trusted relationships remain intact. And when he asks about the technical concerns, that's where I come in. But only after you've established the continuity he needs to feel secure." Marcus considered this, then nodded slowly. "It could work. A 1-2 approach." "Exactly. We leverage your established relationship and my technical expertise. A perfect demonstration of why the merger makes sense." He actually smiled at that. "Clever. I have my moments," I replied dryly. We spent the weekend preparing, developing a detailed presentation that addressed both the explicit technical concerns and the implicit relationship worries. Marcus briefed me thoroughly on Richard Barnett's personality, preferences, and priorities. "He likes concrete examples, not theoretical benefits," Marcus explained as we refined our approach Sunday night. "And he responds well to stories about other clients with similar challenges." "Good to know," I said, making notes. "Anything else I should be aware of?" Marcus hesitated. "He can be dismissive at first, especially with people he doesn't know. Don't take it personally." I raised an eyebrow. "This isn't my first difficult client, Marcus." "I know," he said quickly. "But Barnett is in a category of his own. Just follow my lead initially, okay?" Once he sees your technical knowledge, he'll come around. The meeting started exactly as Marcus had predicted. Richard Barnett, a silver-haired man with the robust confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place at the table, barely acknowledged me as he greeted Marcus with backslapping familiarity. "Chen," he boomed, "good to see you. Though I wish it were under better circumstances." Marcus guided the conversation skillfully, acknowledging Barnett's concerns while gradually steering toward the technical discussion. "We've brought some specific examples of how Nexus's integration platform can enhance rather than disrupt your existing infrastructure," he said, creating my opening. I stepped in seamlessly, presenting detailed case studies of financial institutions with similar legacy systems. I'd done my homework, referencing specific challenges Lakeshore had faced in the past and demonstrating how our platform could address them without expensive overhauls. Barnett interrupted frequently at first, his questions carrying an edge of skepticism. But as the technical discussion deepened, his attitude subtly shifted. His questions became more substantive, less challenging. By the time I walked through our implementation timeline, he was leaning forward, engaged. "Your platform handled First National's compliance reporting issues?" he asked, referring to one of Lakeshore's competitors. "Their CIO told me that was an unsolvable problem without a complete system replacement. It required some custom development," I acknowledged, "but yes, we integrated their disparate data sources into a unified reporting framework that satisfied regulatory requirements. We can show you the architecture if you're interested." He studied me with new consideration. "I would be very interested, Ms. Chen." By the end of the 2-hour meeting, we'd not only addressed his concerns but identified several additional areas where the Nexus platform could deliver significant value to Lakeshore. Barnett shook my hand firmly as we concluded, his initial dismissiveness replaced by cautious respect. "You've given me a lot to think about," he said. "Chen, you didn't tell me your CEO was so thorough." Marcus glanced at me, a hint of pride in his expression. "Olivia has a way of exceeding expectations." As we walked to the elevator, I nudged my brother gently. "Was that almost a compliment?" He shrugged, but I caught the slight smile. "You handled him well." "Not many people can turn Barnett around in one meeting." "We handled him well," I corrected. That was a perfect example of why this partnership works. In the car back to the office, Marcus was unusually reflective. "You know, I spent years trying to impress Barnett, cultivating that relationship. And you just walked in and commanded his respect in 2 hours. That's not entirely fair," I pointed out. "You laid the groundwork. He wouldn't have listened to me at all if you hadn't set it up properly." "Maybe," he conceded. "But still, it was impressive." Later that afternoon, Barnett called Marcus personally to confirm that Lakeshore would not only be staying with us but wanted to explore expanding our services to their international divisions. It was a significant win, financially and symbolically, for our newly merged company. I shared the news with the executive team, giving Marcus full credit for his role in securing the relationship. The appreciation in his eyes suggested that this gesture, publicly acknowledging his contribution, meant more than I'd realized. That evening, as I was preparing to leave the office, Marcus appeared in my doorway. "Dinner," he suggested. "Elena wants to hear about the Lakeshore meeting. She suggested that new place on Pike Street." I hesitated, surprised by the invitation. "You want me to join you and Elena for dinner?" "Unless you have other plans," he said, suddenly uncertain. "No, no plans," I assured him. "I'd love to." Dinner with Marcus and Elena felt like a glimpse into an alternate reality where my brother and I had maintained a closer relationship through the years. Elena, always the more emotionally intelligent of the pair, created a warm atmosphere, drawing out stories and laughter. She showed me ultrasound pictures of their baby, a boy, they'd just learned, and asked if I'd consider being his godmother. "Really?" I asked, genuinely surprised. Marcus nodded. "We've been talking about it. Seems right, somehow." I felt a tightness in my throat. I'd be honored. As we were finishing dessert, Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly. "There's something else we wanted to discuss with you." He glanced at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. "We're buying a house, that Craftsman in Madison Park we've had our eye on for years. The timing finally worked out." "That's wonderful," I said. "It's a beautiful neighborhood." "We close next month," he continued. "And we're planning a housewarming. Small gathering, just family and close friends." He hesitated. "We'd like you to be there. And, we're inviting Mom and Dad." I understood the significance immediately. This would be the first family gathering since the acquisition, the first time we'd all be together with our new professional dynamics in play. "You think that's wise?" I asked carefully. Elena stepped in. "We think it's necessary. This baby is bringing a lot of things into perspective. Life's too short for continued estrangement." Marcus nodded in agreement. They've been asking about you. Especially Dad. I think he's trying to process everything that's happened. I considered this. My relationship with our parents had been cordial but distant since I left the traditional path they'd envisioned for me. The acquisition had complicated things further. My father, especially, seemed unsure how to relate to my success. I'll be there, I promised. Just tell me when. Walking back to my car after dinner, I felt a strange sense of lightness. The professional and personal walls between Marcus and me were beginning to crumble, revealing the possibility of something I hadn't dared hope for, a genuine relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition. The next day, Zoe found me lost in thought, staring out my office window at the Seattle skyline. "Earth to Olivia," she said, waving a hand in front of my face. "You okay? You seem distracted." I turned, smiling. "Just thinking about how quickly things can change." "Philosophical this morning, are we?" she teased. "Any particular reason?" I thought about the dinner with Marcus and Elena, about being asked to be godmother to their son, about the tentative bridge being rebuilt between us. "Just appreciating the unexpected turns life takes," I said simply. She studied me curiously. "Well, while you're contemplating the mysteries of the universe, the board is waiting for us in the conference room." "Quarterly results presentation?" "Right," I said, gathering my materials. "Let's go show them how well unexpected turns can work out." The Madison Park Craftsman stood proud against the evening sky, its windows glowing with warm light that spilled onto the manicured lawn. I sat in my car across the street, watching guests arrive at Marcus and Elena's housewarming party. My parents had entered 10 minutes earlier, my father carrying a large gift wrapped in silver paper, my mother bringing a bouquet of flowers. I deliberately arrived late, giving myself time to prepare for this reunion. 5 years of building a company had taught me to face challenges head-on, to walk into difficult rooms with confidence. Yet here I was, hesitating outside my brother's new home, feeling strangely vulnerable. This wasn't a business negotiation or a client presentation. This was family, messier, more complicated, with deeper stakes. My phone buzzed with a text. From Elena, "Are you coming? Your parents keep asking when you'll arrive." No more delaying the inevitable. I grabbed the housewarming gift from my passenger seat, a smart home system I'd had custom programmed with features specific to their needs, and crossed the street. Elena answered the door, her pregnancy now visibly showing at 5 months. "Finally," she said, pulling me into a hug. I was about to send a search party. "Sorry," I said, returning her embrace. "Conference call ran late." A white lie, but easier than explaining my hesitation. She took the gift, eyebrows rising at its weight. "Substantial. But you didn't need to bring anything." "Of course I did," I replied. "It's tradition." The interior of the house was stunning, original woodwork restored to a warm glow, modern amenities blended seamlessly with historic charm. About 20 people mingled throughout the open first floor, voices and laughter creating a pleasant hum. Marcus spotted me from across the room and made his way over, stopping to exchange words with guests as he navigated the crowd. "You made it," he said when he reached me, offering a brief, somewhat awkward hug. We were still learning how to be around each other in social settings. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. "The house is beautiful, Marcus. Absolutely worth the wait." Pride flickered across his face. "Thanks. We got lucky with the timing. The market dipped just as we were ready to make an offer." He glanced toward the back of the house. "Mom and Dad are on the patio. They've been asking about you." I nodded, steeling myself. "I'll head back in a minute. Give me the tour first?" He seemed to understand my need to delay the encounter, leading me through the house with obvious pride. The kitchen had been completely renovated with professional-grade appliances. Upstairs, a former attic had been transformed into a spacious master suite. The room that would become the nursery was painted a soft blue, with an antique rocking chair by the window. "Elena's grandmother's," Marcus explained, noticing my gaze on the chair. "For generations of her family have rocked babies in it." "It's perfect," I said, genuinely moved by the history, the continuity. As we descended the stairs, Marcus lowered his voice. "Just so you know, Dad's been different since the acquisition news broke." More subdued. "I think he's trying to figure out how to relate to you now." "That makes 2 of us," I admitted. The patio was illuminated with string lights that cast a gentle glow over the gathering. My parents were seated at a table near the outdoor fireplace. My father engaged in conversation with a couple I didn't recognize, my mother arranging appetizers on a platter. She saw me first, her hands pausing mid-motion. "Olivia," she called, rising to greet me. Her hug was warm, uncomplicated by the professional dynamics that had strained my relationship with my father and brother. "You look wonderful. That color suits you." My father turned at her exclamation, excusing himself from his conversation. He approached more carefully, his usual confidence tempered by an unfamiliar hesitation. "Olivia," he said, his voice carrying the formal tone he adopted when uncertain. "Glad you could make it." "Hi, Dad," I replied, accepting his brief embrace. "Beautiful house, isn't it?" "Remarkable," he agreed. "Your brother has excellent taste." An awkward silence threatened to descend. My mother, ever the social facilitator, jumped in. "Olivia, have you met the Richardsons? Jim is a partner at your father's old firm." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. I found myself explaining Nexus to curious guests, most of whom had heard about the acquisition. "So you're the whiz kid who bought out Meridian," one of my father's colleagues said, clearly impressed. "Harrison Powell was just telling me about it at the club last week. Said it was the smoothest transition he's experienced in 30 years of business." I glanced at my father, catching a flicker of something in his expression. Pride? Surprise? Before he turned away to refill his drink. Later, as the party began to wind down, I found myself alone with my father in the kitchen. I was loading dishes into the dishwasher while he dried wine glasses by hand, a task he'd always insisted on doing himself, claiming no one else handled the crystal properly. "You don't need to help," he said, not looking at me. "You're a guest." "So are you," I pointed out, continuing to rinse plates. He nodded, accepting this logic. We worked in silence for a few minutes, the routine oddly reminiscent of childhood. Evenings when I'd help with kitchen cleanup. "I received an interesting call last week," he finally said, carefully placing a dried glass on the counter. "Richard Barnett from Lakeshore Financial. We serve on a non-profit board together." I kept my expression neutral. "Oh? He spoke very highly of you. Said you provided the most thorough technical assessment he'd seen in years." My father placed another glass beside the first, creating a perfect line. He seemed quite impressed. "That's good to hear," I said, unsure where this was heading. He also mentioned that Marcus was instrumental in maintaining the relationship through the transition. Another glass joined the row. "Said you two make a formidable team." I smiled slightly. "We're learning to work together." My father was quiet for a moment, methodically drying another glass. "Your brother was very angry when the acquisition was first announced. Called me in a state I hadn't seen since he was a teenager." This surprised me. Marcus had never mentioned calling our father during that tumultuous time. "What did you tell him?" I asked carefully. "I told him to get over himself," my father replied matter-of-factly. "That business is business, and if his sister had outmaneuvered him, he should learn from it rather than complain about it." I nearly dropped the plate I was rinsing. This was not the response I'd expected from a man who had always seemed to favor Marcus's traditional career path over my entrepreneurial ventures. "That doesn't sound like you," I said honestly. He glanced at me, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "No? Perhaps you don't know me as well as you think." He set down his towel, turning to face me fully. "I've been hard on you, Olivia. Pushed you toward paths I thought were safer, more established. When you left business school, I thought you were making a terrible mistake." "You made that pretty clear," I said, unable to keep a touch of old hurt from my voice. "I was wrong," he said simply. The words hung in the air between us, unexpected and transformative. My father had built his identity around being right, the advisor, the guide, the one who knew best. Admitting he was wrong, especially to his children, was unprecedented. "The company you've built," he continued, "the vision you've executed, it's remarkable. More than remarkable. It's visionary in a way I didn't anticipate." He picked up another glass, resuming his methodical drying. "I should have supported you more. I see that now." I struggled to find the right response, emotions rising unexpectedly to the surface. "Thank you for saying that," I finally managed. "It means a lot." He nodded once, acknowledging the significance of the moment without dwelling on it, typical of his generation's approach to emotional conversations. "Your mother wants to visit your offices sometime. See what all the fuss is about." His tone was lighter now, offering a path back to more comfortable ground. "I'd like that," I said, accepting the shift. "Both of you should come. I'll give you the full tour." When we rejoined the others in the living room, something had changed, a tension released, a new understanding established without fanfare. My mother noticed immediately, her perceptive eyes darting between us as we entered. She smiled, saying nothing but clearly pleased by whatever she observed. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Elena pulled me aside. "You and your father seemed to have a moment in the kitchen," she said quietly. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I replied. "I think we finally found some common ground." She squeezed my hand. "Good. That's been a long time coming. She glanced toward Marcus, who was saying goodbye to the last departing guests. This whole experience, the acquisition, the baby coming, it's shifted something fundamental in him. I've noticed, I said. He admires you, she continued. More than he can easily express. Always has, actually, though it used to manifest as competition. This was hard to believe, given our history. Marcus has never lacked confidence, I pointed out. In his abilities, no, she agreed. But in his choices? That's different. You've always seemed so certain about your path, even when it wasn't the expected one. He envied that certainty. She smiled as Marcus approached. Didn't you, love? Didn't I what? He asked, slipping an arm around her waist. Envy your sister's conviction about her own path. He looked embarrassed but didn't deny it. Elena has this annoying habit of being insightful, he told me. It's very inconvenient for maintaining my dignified facade. I laughed, surprised by his candor. And here I thought you had it all figured out. Appearances can be deceiving, he said with unexpected sincerity. I followed the prescribed path, did everything by the book. But sometimes I wondered if I was building the life I wanted or the life that was expected. And now? I asked. He looked around at the beautiful home, at his pregnant wife, at our parents chatting by the fireplace. Now I'm figuring out the difference, and finding that sometimes they can align after all. Later that night, driving home along darkened streets, I reflected on the evening's revelations. The family dynamics that had seemed so fixed, so immutable, were shifting in ways I couldn't have predicted. My father's acknowledgement, Marcus's confession, they represented possibilities I had long ago stopped hoping for. Monday morning brought a return to business reality. The integration teams had encountered unexpected challenges with merging the customer databases, requiring a significant reconfiguration of the migration plan. Zoe paced my office, frustration evident in her clipped tones. We're looking at a 2-week delay minimum, she reported. The data structures are more incompatible than we initially assessed. I frowned, calculating the ripple effects. 2 weeks pushes us into the Watson contract renewal period. That's not ideal. It's worse than not ideal, Zoe countered. Watson specifically cited the integrated platform as a condition for their renewal. If we can't deliver by their deadline. The door opened, and Marcus entered without knocking, a tablet in hand. Sorry to interrupt, but I think I have a solution to the database problem. Zoe raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. We have 3 integration specialists working on it. What makes you think you found something they missed? Instead of bristling at her tone, Marcus simply handed her the tablet. Because I've been working with Meridian systems for 8 years, and I recognized a pattern in the error logs that reminded me of an issue we had with the Nielsen migration back in 2021, Zoe scrolled through his notes, her expression shifting from skepticism to interest. This could work, she admitted. But we'd need to reconfigure the entire approach. I've already drafted the revised architecture, Marcus said, swiping to a new screen on the tablet. It would require pulling resources from the UI refresh. But we could keep the Watson timeline intact. I studied the proposal, impressed by both the technical solution and Marcus's initiative. This is solid work, I said. How long have you been working on this? Since the errors first appeared last Thursday, he replied. I spent the weekend testing the approach on a sandbox environment. The preliminary results are promising. Zoe looked up from the tablet. Why didn't you bring this to the integration team directly? Protocol, he said simply. Major changes to the integration roadmap need executive approval. I wanted to present a complete solution, not just identify the problem. I made a decision. Implement it. Pull whatever resources you need from non-critical paths. And Zoe, let's adjust our process to allow for more direct communication between departments during the integration. We can't afford these silos. After Zoe left to brief the integration team, I turned to Marcus. You didn't have to spend your weekend solving this. Especially right after the housewarming. He shrugged. The success of this merger affects all of us. Besides, technical puzzles have always been my stress relief. Elena knows that by now. Still, I appreciate the effort, I said. Above and beyond. Just doing my job, he replied, but I could tell he was pleased by the recognition. The database solution proved to be a turning point in our integration efforts. With the technical approach resolved, the teams began working more collaboratively, breaking down the artificial boundaries between Nexus and Meridian staff. Marcus became more visible throughout the organization, no longer limiting himself to strategy meetings but actively engaging with implementation teams. 3 weeks later, we celebrated a significant milestone, the successful migration of our first major client to the integrated platform. The Watson contract was renewed ahead of schedule, with expanded services that increased the annual value by 30%. The executive team gathered for a small celebration, champagne flowing freely as we toasted the achievement. To successful integration, Zoe proposed, raising her glass. Of systems and companies. And people, I added, catching Marcus's eye. Across the room. Later, as the gathering dispersed, Marcus lingered behind. I've been thinking about our organizational structure moving forward, he said. Now that the initial integration phase is complete. What's on your mind? I asked, curious about his direction. We need to formalize the innovation pipeline. Between Meridian's established client base and Nexus's development capabilities, he explained. Right now, it's happening ad hoc, but we're missing opportunities for systematic cross-pollination. I nodded, seeing his point. What do you propose? A new division, he said, his enthusiasm evident. Focused specifically on identifying client needs that our current solutions don't address, then fast-tracking development to fill those gaps. A bridge between sales, account management, and product development. Interesting, I said, genuinely intrigued. Who would lead it? That's what I wanted to discuss. He hesitated, then continued more confidently. I'd like to step back from the CSO role and build this division from the ground up. It aligns better with my technical background and my understanding of both companies' capabilities. This was unexpected. The Chief Strategy Officer position carried more prestige, more authority than what he was proposing. You'd be taking a title demotion, I pointed out. At least on paper. Titles are overrated, he said, surprising me again. I'm more interested in building something meaningful than in how it looks on a business card. I studied him, seeing a version of my brother I barely recognized, one focused on creation rather than achievement, on impact rather than status. Who are you, and what have you done with Marcus Chen? He laughed. Let's just say recent events have clarified my priorities. The baby? I guessed. Partly, he acknowledged. But also watching you these past months. You built Nexus because you believed in the vision, not because of how it would look on your resume. I want to approach my work with that same clarity of purpose. The sentiment touched me deeply. After years of feeling judged by my brother, I was now serving as his inspiration. If you're serious about this, draft a formal proposal. Structure, staffing needs, objectives, timeline. We'll review it at the next executive meeting. Already done, he said, pulling a folder from his bag. I wanted to be prepared in case you were receptive to the idea. 3 days later, the executive team unanimously approved Marcus's proposal for the new Innovation Bridge division. His passion for the concept was contagious, and the potential business impact was compelling. He would transition from CSO to division director over the next month, with a new chief strategy officer to be hired from outside. That evening, I invited Marcus and Elena to dinner at Canlis, Seattle's most celebrated restaurant. The occasion deserved the best, and I'd reserved the private dining room overlooking Lake Union. This is unnecessary, Marcus protested as we were seated. It's just an internal reorganization. It's more than that, I countered. It's a new chapter for the company. And for us. Elena, radiant at 7 months pregnant, smiled knowingly. She's right, you know. Some moments deserve recognition. The meal was exquisite, seasonal Pacific Northwest cuisine paired with exceptional wines, sparkling cider for Elena. As dessert was served, I raised my glass. To the Innovation Bridge. May it connect not just systems and clients, but past and future. Marcus clinked his glass against mine. And to the bridge builder, he added, surprising me with the personal acknowledgement. Who showed me that the most interesting path isn't always the most obvious one. I think that calls for a proper toast, Elena said, reaching into her purse. She withdrew a small wrapped package and placed it on the table. We were going to save this for your birthday next month, but this seems like the right moment. Curious, I unwrapped the gift, a small velvet box containing a beautiful pendant. The design was unusual, a delicate silver bridge spanning 2 distinct shapes, one structured and angular, the other flowing and organic. Small diamonds marked the connection points. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely moved. But what, it's us, Marcus explained. Meridian and Nexus. I had it custom made, she added. One of my architectural clients knows an amazing jewelry designer. I fastened the pendant around my neck, touched by the thoughtfulness, the symbolism. Thank you. Both of you. This means more than I can say. Walking to our cars after dinner, Marcus hung back as Elena moved ahead. There's something else I wanted to tell you, he said quietly. We're naming the baby Oliver. After you. I stopped walking, stunned by this revelation. Marcus, don't make it weird, he said, reverting to his usual deflective humor. It's just a name. But we both knew it was more than that. It was acknowledgement, reconciliation, honor, all the things we'd struggled to express directly. It's a good name, I finally said, matching his lighter tone. Strong. Distinguished. Stubborn, he added with a smile. Independent-minded. Poor kid doesn't stand a chance, I laughed. As I drove home that night, the pendant a comforting weight against my collarbone, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The acquisition that had begun as a business strategy had transformed into something far more significant, a catalyst for healing old wounds, rebuilding broken connections, creating new possibilities. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Just heard about Marcus's new division. Bold move for both of you. Still coming to the board presentation tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it, I typed back. And Zoe? Sometimes the most valuable acquisitions aren't the ones that show up on the balance sheet. Getting philosophical in your old age, she replied with an eye roll emoji. But I take your point. See you tomorrow, boss. I smiled, tucking the phone away as I navigated toward home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new decisions to make. But for now, I savored the quiet satisfaction of a bridge. Well built, between companies, between siblings, between past wounds and future possibilities. The pendant caught the light as I moved, its symbolic bridge gleaming in the darkness. Different shapes, different approaches, connected by a shared vision. It was perfect, not just for our companies, but for us, proof that the most meaningful connections often emerge from the most unexpected circumstances. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.